Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome as you come into today's webinar on emotional intelligence. So I'll introduce myself first of all. My name is Tumi. I'm a training producer here at Informa. I'm not sure if anyone's ever been to an Informa Connect event, training course, in-house course or conference. But here under Informa Connect Academy, we are part of the larger body of Informa. And Informa Connect Academy has been situated in the Middle East for 30 years or so. But we also have global offices in over 30 countries, including America, South and North, parts of Europe, in the UK, Australia, Canada, and even parts of Northern Africa. So we are indeed a global company. And Informa Connect Academy seeks to provide your training solution needs through our public courses to really be the solution providers to what is going on in the working world. With me today, I have Darren Carrington, who is going to be our webinar host, our webinar expert, our expert in emotional intelligence. But with Darren comes with extreme knowledge and a versatile background as a coach, as a mentor, background in radio and TV production as well. He's no stranger to the Middle East, been here for over 15 years. And for Darren, he has excellent feedback when it comes to his courses because he really does care about personal development. He really does want to ensure that the content that he delivers is actually actionable and effective in our day-to-day lives. He is passionate about people performance. And so I'm really looking forward to this webinar where he speaks on, emotional intelligence, managing your teams without losing your mind, which is such a key vital commodity to be emotionally intelligent. Just from the chat here, we have vast people from literally all over the world, and our offices and the places that we work and do business is becoming increasingly more global. So we need to have this understanding of emotional intelligence, which despite all the languages that we may speak, emotional intelligence is a language universal to all. So I'm going to hand over to Darren, who's going to take our webinar today. In terms of questions, please do use the Q&A box that you can see at the bottom of your screen. You can also send questions directly to me, but we want to make it as interactive as possible. So please, when you're putting comments in the chat, you can select to everyone and let everyone see your responses, your opinions, and what you think. So without much ado, I'm going to hand over to Darren. Hi, Darren.
Hi, Timmy. Thank you for a wonderful introduction and welcome along to this rather unique opportunity to spend an hour with you to talk about emotional intelligence in action. And as you're starting to join, I recognize some very familiar names. So it's great to see you. Casey, you're at the top of the list in terms of the webinar chat coming through. Good to have you joining us and great for everyone to take the time out of your very busy schedule. Thank you so much. As Tumi was saying, I do have a lot of experience around developing leaders as a whole in the region for the last 17 years. And there's a core element that seems to be a go-to need that we need to sort of plug the gap on, and that is always around emotional intelligence. Just last week, I was delivering a 4-day leadership development program, and the missing ingredient was emotional intelligence. It's all about driving to get tasks delivered. Let's go and do this. Let's go and do this. But without the people, we don't have anything. So today is really going to be a consolidated sense of awareness that we can create around the need for growing our understanding of the people we have the privilege of leading and getting them to do the tasks that we want them to do, but doing it in their way where they're motivated and inspired to deliver on those objectives. So let's think about what we will get through today. Now, by the end of this webinar, I guess you all have something individual that you want to take away from this. I'm hoping that we'll cover all of those individual needs. But first and foremost, we will uncover the power of emotional intelligence. It's a broad topic. Even in this webinar, we will barely scratch the surface because it goes broad and it goes deep. But we'll also think about a sense of understanding. What does it really mean and why does it matter? I've given a bit of an inclination around what that might be, but I guess if we can all leave here today with that sense of alignment as to what it really means and why it's important, then we can start I guess, proceeding towards all of those goals that we can, I guess, achieve to deliver on those. We'll give you a couple of examples of real world examples of where emotional intelligence has been a game changer for big entities and well-known names around the world. We'll give you access to some practical strategies for how you can take some of those next steps to develop your own emotional intelligence and apply those with your team. And you will have gathered some next steps that will help you to be more effective in your leadership. And ultimately, just by attending and being here for the hour, you will have taken the first step in your journey to enhance your own emotional intelligence. Now, when we talk about emotional intelligence, it's often referred to as EQ or EI. So it's probably worth thinking about some sense of alignment. Let us start by seeking to understand what emotional intelligence is. And now in a moment, I'll pose a question on the screen for you. And I would like you, there's no right or wrong answer here. I would just like, for the purpose of our time together, really to get a sense of alignment, some sort of universal understanding as to what emotional intelligence is. Because you could put 1,000 people in the room, ask them the same question and get 1,000 different responses, but they all similarly seem to say the same thing. But it would be nice to get a sense of unity today. So can I please ask you in the chat, can I ask you please to either just write your response? How would you define or describe emotional intelligence? And remember, there's no right or wrong answer, please. So just type away. And if you can sort of keep it down to maybe one sentence or even a couple of words, that's absolutely fine. There's no pressure on, a paragraph or maybe a whole chapter. So Lisa, thank you. Managing my emotions and responding to others' emotions. Love that, Lisa. Thank you. Mohammed, reacting according to the situation. Michelle, the ability to recognize, manage, and regulate emotions. Michelle, I think we need to swap seats here. Also, ability to manage my own reactions. Excellent. Understanding own and others' feelings. Shema, deeply understand others' emotions and needs. Dusty, ability to manage your behavior in different situations or scenarios. Yes. Raphael, thanks for joining, Raphael. Empathy. That's a big winner of my heart there, Raphael. Fadi, understanding others' emotions. Rasheen, it is how you read the emotions of others and react accordingly. Beautiful. Daisy, understanding and dealing with emotions. Yeah, these are great. Look, we'll keep these coming in, but ultimately we are on the same page, which is great because we don't have to sort of reinvent the wheel here. We are singing from the same sheet, which is sometimes not always being achievable. Katie, empathy. Yes, indeed. Nora, to be able to read the emotional levels and react accordingly. Okay. Jade, self-awareness. Thank you. So if we understand what emotional intelligence is and we know how to describe it, let me ask you another question. How do you know when somebody is emotionally intelligent? Again, can you put your response in the chat, please? How do you know when somebody is emotionally intelligent? What is it you see? What is it you hear? How do they behave? What are the sort of indicators or characteristics that would be something that would leap out? That person is demonstrating emotional intelligence. They show empathy, their emotions. They can regulate their emotions. They respond instead of reacting. Yes. Yasmin, self-awareness, self-regulatory, empathy, social skills, and motivation. Okay, they are able to respond accordingly to the situation. Yeah, absolutely. They listen actively. Nice one, Sage. Yes. Hajra, active listener, pause before responding. Okay, very nice. Very nice. Thank you very much. And again, Jay coming in, composed in heated arguments. I love that because I often talk about in a training program, how we can quite easily react to emotional triggers. When we react, sometimes we might say something or do something that we later wish we hadn't said or actually did. So if we can shift from reacting to just evaluating the situation and the people within the situation and responding appropriately, we've avoided that reaction that we would not regret further down the line. But these are great responses. Thank you. Jasper, self-regulation behaviors. Danya, they stay calm under pressure, listen well, show empathy, handle conflict respectfully, and respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. Okay, these are great. Awesome. Thank you very much. And we will go through all of these later. When we think about EQ or EI, as it's often referred to, we sometimes get into a conversation that goes about something in a slightly different direction. When we think about IQ versus EQ, we hear this a lot. What's the most favorable? There's a lot of emphasis placed on IQ. So we go off, we get our academic qualifications, and then that should pretty much set us up for life. And yeah, it gets us to a point of being recognized and being worthy to hold a certain position. And then all of a sudden, our rewards are shown in the sense that we are promoted. And all of a sudden, we have the responsibility where we're now responsible for people. And just having IQ, which is our cognitive intelligence, doesn't always support us to have success as a leader. So if we look at the cognitive intelligence, or IQ, and if you look at this as a definition, the capacity for learning, reasoning, understanding, and similar forms of mental activity, that's going to get us so far. But they say that according to research, by the time we're 18, we are pretty much set in terms of our capacity for learning or willingness to learn. So I know that's not the same for everyone. There are sort of alternatives and, exceptions to the rule. But ultimately, the majority of human form, by the time they were 18, we call this a static form of intelligence. Whereas emotional intelligence, where you can see a set of emotional and social skills that help us influence the way that we perceive and express ourselves, how we help develop others, how we sort of respond in challenging situations and manage ourselves and emotions in the most effective way. That's EQ or EI. Now, when it comes to leadership and how we sort of get the best out of our people, they say through, again, research, up to 60% of job performance is done through emotional intelligence. What that means is, if I'm developed as a leader, I am emotionally intelligent, and I'm connecting with my team members on an individual basis. I'm getting to know who they are, what motivates them, what demotivates them. I know what makes them tick. I'm understanding when they've got stuff going on in their personal life that's having an impact on what they do in the professional capacity. That drives up to 60% of performance. So if I'm going to be a successful leader, then I need to be more emotionally intelligent. Now, there's a great reference that says IQ will get you to the door. EQ will get you through it and up the stairs. And I love that because it's so true that, when we think about, we can get to the door, we can be recognized, but also how do we then start to build those networks? How do we start to make those connections to make things happen, to be more understood and given more opportunities? Thanks, Jasmine. IQ about thinking and EQ about feelings. Yes. Michelle, showing flexibility according to the emotional situations we get into or face. Yes. Now, when we think about emotional intelligence, we hear this name of Daniel Goleman, and some regard him as the pioneer when it comes to emotional intelligence. Now, we didn't really hear about Daniel Goleman until the mid-90s, but there was research happening in the early 80s by Dr. Ruven Baron, who really identified emotional coaching and some of those associated behaviors and competencies to see if somebody would be successful in terms of their EQ. But Daniel Goleman took a lot of that research and he sort of wrote his own research around that, using that as a foundation. And he came up and launched this book in the mid-90s. Emotional intelligence, why it can matter more than IQ, which really sort of lends itself to what we've already been talking about so far today. Now, his book was very successful. 5 million copies sold, #1 in the New York bestsellers list, written in 40 different languages, hugely successful. And he put it down to 4 particular areas of competency. Now, he called it self-awareness, self-management, relationship management, and social awareness. Now, bearing in mind, we are fairly limited on time. You could go into this in so much depth, but let's just skim over the surface. So if we're talking about self-awareness here, how we recognize our emotions, looking at what you put in the chat so far, how we sort of demonstrate behaviors that impact on our life. So how we understand ourselves, how we understand others, our communication, our strengths. I don't like to call weaknesses, but our blind spots. So, our self-awareness, if we can recognize where we are really, really strong, where are we not quite so strong? What are our potential blind spots? If you've got something in our peripheral vision and we can't see it really, really clearly, that could be something that would really enhance what we do with our team members. So how we prefer to process information, how we understand those differences, cultural differences, or personality or communication differences, all of these really are linked to the self-awareness. Self-management. Here, our ability to manage change. And again, we are all going through change, certainly in the world of business and leadership. We can't rest on our laurels. Things are happening all of the time where we have to be managing those things internally. So again, how we deal with stress, how we deal with some of those uncertain things that are just presented to us without any sort of warning. They come out of the blue. Our mindfulness, our mindset, our general attitude, that all comes under self-management. When it comes to relationship management, as a leader, here, how we connect with others in ways where they feel valued, understood, and heard. Now, when it comes to leadership and getting the best out of our people, how we influence, how we motivate. I don't necessarily like the word persuade, because if I'm persuading somebody, then I'm trying to push them into an area or direction that maybe they're not really comfortable in going. However, if I'm able to influence them, I've been able to communicate in such a way, all of the benefits are there, and they're coming along at their own will, not me pushing them unwillingly. So it's about how we manage conflict. It's about how we are showing up as the driver of change, that catalyst of change. Ultimately, this would be, in terms of a high level of development, it'd be critical for teamwork and collaboration and how we can optimize that. When we think about social awareness, again, the ability to respond to others, as you've alluded to in your responses on the chat so far, how we respond to others and try to understand others. So again, empathy will be playing a big part here. And coming back to what we've seen in the chat so far, empathy, that's a big bridge builder and an understanding component for anyone to really increase human connection. So we show or demonstrate active listening. When we talk about active listening, I personally like to say, let the other person get all the way to the full stop before even attempting to interrupt. And that demonstrates that you are interested in what they have to say. And with that information, you can do so much with that. You can give that sense of understanding. Okay, look, I've gone through these 4 components that were really highlighted in the book from Daniel Goldman. I'm going to ask you now, in terms of a poll, I would love you to respond, please, in terms of a number. I'll give you 5 options, and in the chat, I would just like you to respond by the number, please. What aspect of emotional intelligence do you find most challenging to actually integrate into your leadership? Is it self-awareness, number 1? Is it self-management, number 2? Motivation, number 3? Empathy, number 4? Or social skills, number 5? Thank you, Mohammed. Thanks, Chelsea. Okay. Raphael, you're saying empathy. Interesting. Thank you. Dusty, you're saying self-management. Michelle, empathy as well. Shema, self-management. Michelle, self-management and self-awareness. Jadine, Priya, number 5, social skills, and Jadine, self-management as well. Just the very fact of you answering this question shows a great sense of self-awareness. It's amazing, isn't it, that we don't always have the time or the capacity to really just pause and think about, okay, how am I showing up in the world? How am I showing up with my team? What is it I may have done or said, or the behavior that was displayed, not through an intention, but just as maybe a reaction? How was that perceived? We don't always have the opportunity to really think about where we show up or how we show up. So these responses only goes forward to demonstrate your I guess, unrealized level of self-awareness. So Noah, again, motivation. Russell, again, motivation. Thank you for those. Shema, 3 and 5. So motivation and social skills. Hi, Jose. Good to see you. 3, motivation. Okay. So a nice variation there. A really nice variation. Look, thank you for those. Annalisa, 1 and 4. So self-awareness and empathy. These are great. And again, I'm going to go through these, and I'm sure that there is an insight here that you can take away. And we're only sort of 20 minutes into the webinar. So let's think about the significance of emotional intelligence in leadership. If we haven't made a case study strong enough already, I think when we start to think about the significance, we'll show a little bit more that why it's worth taking the time and paying extra effort and attention to develop ourselves. So if we think about how it enhances our self-awareness, you're demonstrating your level of self-awareness, but there's much more you could be doing, so much more. So when we think about our level of self-awareness, how much more effective we could be as a leader once we are able to manage those emotions, making us be more approachable and more relatable to the people around us. How often do you get short of time, and when somebody comes to you, you don't have the time to devote to them to understand why they've come to you in the first place? So yes, I guess enhanced self-awareness. Also, improved decision-making. We are able, if we have developed highly in our emotional intelligence, we're able to be more effective in our decision making because we're making more rational decisions that will be beneficial for the person we are having the conversation with, for the company, and for us ultimately to help minimize our stress. So again, thinking about how the thoughtful approach to making decisions, how more inclusive we might be able to be for that person around us, and how we can individualize the experience. A big favorite of mine, effective communication. If I'm a developed leader in terms of my emotional intelligence, when I'm able to communicate in a way that the person feels that it's a personalized conversation, what I mean is that we are adapting our communication style to the person that we are having the conversation with. They understand, we are able then to communicate in such a way where there's nothing that's ambiguous, it's clear, it's very concise, there's no misunderstanding. Effective communication, big positive if we can achieve more emotional intelligence as a development. How do you think that's going to positively align with goals that are being achieved, meeting those KPIs maybe sooner, ahead of deadlines and timelines, and the quality of standards going up rather than us having to readdress those where we have to go over and make sure that actually it wasn't done right first time. Let's go back and enhance what we did and how we did it. So communication, or effective communication, is a big one. And empathy. Again, Raphael, you mentioned about empathy, and you said that's an area for you in terms of one of the challenges. So increased empathy. Just imagine if I'm a leader and I'm able to sort of make my team members feel important. Everyone's important. Everyone's important. No matter how many people you have in your employment across the organization, everyone's important to the point where if they don't feel valued, then and understood, then we probably have an issue. So increased empathy, just by trying to put ourselves in the shoes of that other person and trying to understand what they might be going through. I'm not saying that you have to show up as being a soft leader and letting people take advantage of you. But it's really just, you might not have any first-hand experience of what that person has gone through or is going through. But the fact that you're trying to understand, just be there as a listening ear might be just enough for some people. So think about how there are various steps for you to increase your empathy. And in doing so, maybe our stress will start to decrease as well. So we'll be more on top of managing our own stress levels. So again, when we think about high pressure situations, if we are able to recognize and maybe regulate some of those trigger mechanisms within us, things that really create that reaction within us. We've all got them. I've been in this region now 17 years. And one of my triggers when I'm out on the road is people who come up and they almost take the front of my vehicle off when they're coming off on the exit. After 17 years, you'd like to think that that's no longer a hot button, but it is. Guilty as charged, Your Honor. But I manage it. I recognize that that's not aimed at me personally. So again, how we can manage our stress levels is to depersonalize it. Think that, okay, this person is not getting out of bed in the morning and thinking, right, I'm going into the workplace today and I'm going to make my manager's life a living hell. No, it's not an intention. It's just a byproduct. And if we can depersonalize it and start to think about what might be going on, how am I reacting to this particular situation, and regulating some of those emotions so they're no longer becoming hot buttons or triggers, that will help us. Because if we continue to buy into that stress and subscribe to that stress, that will have an impact on our health over time. Innovation and creativity. If we are a highly developed, emotional, intelligent leader, we will create an environment where there's more contribution. There's more creativity coming forward. People are coming up with ideas, and risk-taking could be a great way of us creating a new culture. And if we are willing to be that pioneer to create a new culture, and we are willing to take risks, and again, depending on what industry you're in, there could be limitations as to how much risk you are able to take without it causing danger. But if you've got specific policies and guidelines, just think about how creative you can be with your team to see how you can do things differently. If you've got problems that maybe come up over and over and over again? How can you think about, okay, are we just putting a band-aid over the root cause and not really understanding what the root cause is? How can your team be creative and innovative to try to understand what those root causes are? And ultimately, your enhanced leadership, your ability to influence those, because those around you will be standing still where their teams are not achieving, not delivering. And because you've got this unique ability to influence and communicate the vision, the mission, the strategy of the organization, and how you get your teams to come along and deliver to that, you'll stand out because you will be different. You'll be a different leader that will be recognized. How does Katie do that, I wonder? Katie's got an enhanced level of emotional intelligence. Now, the beauty of emotional intelligence is that we've all got it. We've all got it at different levels of development. Now, depending on who we are, how much do we have and how much somebody wants can depend on success or not having success. So it's never too late to start thinking about initiatives on how we can develop our own emotional intelligence. For me, it's a lifelong journey. I'm very privileged that I've had exposure to it over these years, and I've got the opportunity to share it with leaders in the region. But I'm like a sponge. I want to learn more and grow more in my own emotional intelligence. So let's think about how emotional intelligence and leadership sort of go together. When we start, we've already talked about enhanced decision making. We know that there's a value on that because we'll be making more rational decisions that are in line with the individual and the organization. They feel it's more personalized. The workplace is more of a creative environment. It's more calm and welcoming. And people know that if there's something on their minds, they can share it without any fear of judgment or that information being used against them. That'll be used to enhance what they do. It also helps us in our conflict resolution. When we are able to take a deeper understanding of different perspectives, where we're no longer reacting or working under biases, we start to think about what might be some of those underlying or drivers, underlying factors and motivators why the conflict has arisen in the first place. What's important to party A? What's important to party B? How can I understand what they might be going through in their sort of torment of not understanding each other? How can I be the facilitator to resolve that particular conflict? That's where I guess emotional intelligence as a leadership competency shows itself to be really, really effective because it offers so many different strings to a really new and effective bow. Team dynamics. When we think about team dynamics, I guess it comes down to understanding ways of working, different ways of working. We can strengthen team dynamics by just being able to understand and communicate why somebody wants to do something in a certain way. And it goes back to what I said a short while ago. It's not about one person getting up in the morning and coming into work with the intention of making your life difficult as a leader, but that's just a byproduct. It also enhances in terms of when we are facing change. Our resilience levels go up, our resilience levels increase, the more that we are able to regulate and understand these emotions and what triggers some of these within us and how we can be more effective in the role. So it makes us more adaptable in the face of change. And we are able then to communicate this more effectively with our team members. So when we are able to regulate our own emotions, we can be more robust and be there for them to help them through those transitions as well. It also shows up in a more positive way to build trust and an authenticity. When we show up in a way that's showing calm, collectiveness, and regulation of emotions, people know that over time, there's that sort of consistency. I'm showing up and my patience is there, my understanding is there. Anyone can come to me at any time, and I might have loads of things going on that are pressurizing me, but I show up in an authentic way over and over and over again. So that enhances trustability. So people know that they can come and share stuff, even when they feel that we are under pressure. And I know it's easier said than done because we are all under extreme pressure. Time is not always on our side. Sometimes it can feel like it's our worst enemy because we don't have enough of it. We've got lots to cram in the short time per day that we have. I guess as a leadership competency, emotional intelligence can help us be more effective in our communication. We've already talked about this. Just looking at the chat here, Yasmin, I believe that the most important significance of EI in leadership here is self-awareness, as it's the foundation, and we can't lead others well if we don't understand ourselves first. Bang on, Yasmin, absolutely. Yes, I guess if thinking about after today, how do you go forward and start to develop your own emotional intelligence? I would say focus on self-awareness and don't think about going out and trying to accomplish high levels of development in all 4 of Goldman's competencies, but just focus on one. And we can talk about that at the end of the webinar. But you're absolutely right, Yasmin. Thank you for that. If you can create this leadership competency through enhanced emotional intelligence, you will differentiate yourself as a leader without any shadow of a doubt. You will be standing taller than those around you because you'll be doing something quite unique, something quite different. The leaders I had with me last week, they were all experienced leaders with 10 years plus of leadership experience. And yet they were all suffering. They were all lacking something in terms of performance and success. And it's just a gap in the leadership through emotional intelligence because they don't have the time. So when we make the time, we'll see the benefits. And speaking of which, if we think about real world case studies, let's start with Federal Express. Now, FedEx, they implemented a leadership comprehensive development program that was really focusing on enhancing emotional intelligence competencies. And out of the leaders around the world that took part in this competency, over 50% saw a significant improvement in their leadership outcomes. That's pretty significant in its numbers. 72% saw an increase in terms of their confidence and their competence when it came to making decisions. So think about how that's going to impact us in the workplace. So if I'm a leader, and all of a sudden, I'm now more confident and competent in my decision making. So I might allocate more roles and responsibilities to certain members of my team. This would have an impact on my work-life balance. And one of the data points from this case study for FedEx, 60% of those leaders that went through that program saw a significant increase in their work-life balance. Would that work for you? If you could improve your work-life balance by maybe being more confident and competent in your leadership through decision-making and maybe delegation and empowering others, and that had an impact on you not being on the end of the phone or messaging all over the weekend and when you're on vacation, I'm sure that's going to have a very positive impact on your family life and your social circle as well. When we think about influencing, 58% of those people that went through that program saw an increase in their influencing capabilities. Going back to what I said earlier, if I'm influencing somebody, I've highlighted all of the benefits and they're coming along with me at their own will, rather than me just trying to push them into a direction that they're not really happy about going into. So if you're looking for any further proof that, you need to look at developing emotional intelligence, how we can implement this in an organizational structure, there's certainly a lot of room for growth here. When we think about another real example, the former New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, she's known all over the globe for her empathetic and decisive leadership style. And when she was in her term of office, she was faced with significant challenges. There was the Christchurch mosque shootings, and obviously, as you all faced during your term of leadership, obviously the pandemic. Now, Jacinda, she actually highlighted her use of emotional intelligence. She was very empathetic, she was very compassionate, and she was very clear in her communication. Now, this not only helped her to win admiration from obviously the followers in her own country, but she got recognized for that approach around the world. And of course, it enhanced her popularity as well. And if you're looking for any other reason why, we should really consider developing emotional intelligence, I guess this really helps to underscore the power of that and the benefits that will come from it. So I'd like you at this point just to self-reflect for maybe 30 seconds or so, and just think about what is it you are doing at the moment, and all that we've talked about so far. Is there anything that you could do differently? And you don't have to answer that. This is for you to self-reflect. You don't have to answer that. But think about all that you are doing at the moment as a leader, and based on what we've talked about so far, is there anything that you could do slightly differently? You might think, how do I implement some of this stuff then, Darren? Because you've talked about a lot of things. And if I was to walk away and try to apply something, what might that be? Let's think about what you could do. So as we go through this next section, please just think about what you could do to take something away that would help you implement emotional intelligence within your leadership style. So I guess it really thinks about the very beginning. If you can't improve what you can't measure. So taking a leaf out of Peter Drucker's book, if we think about conducting regular self-assessments, now there are so many available on the market. We could recommend, we think about the EQI 2.0 model, a great model, gives you a great set of insights in terms of the report that is generated, but it doesn't have to go that deeply. You can look at any emotional intelligence assessment. It could be a self-assessment. It could be one that's coming from a governing body. And there are so many available on the market. But it gives you something to start having a conversation with yourself. And that's the main thing, to start having a conversation with yourself. And if you're answering a self-assessment, please be as honest with those responses as you can be. Don't respond as where you would like to be. Respond where you see yourself being right now. And then give it to somebody else and ask them to do exactly the same assessment about you and see, are there similarities? Are there differences? When we start to think about the next one, so conducting regular self-assessments, do these every couple of months, every quarter, because that's a way that we can start closing the gap. Thanks, Katie. Find more time. Using empathy, compassion, and clear communication has always been a priority with you and your team. The time is definitely not easy to find during busy day to day. Yeah, but it does take a commitment, Katie, to make the time. You're absolutely right. And again, in those team talks, think about how you can leverage constructive feedback. Ask them how you show up. And again, go back to my leaders last week when we were talking about feedback conversations. I said, look, we're not asking how you show up as a leader per se, but how you show up in certain areas through those interactions that you're having on a one-to-one with your team members. Make them feel psychologically safe to give you that feedback, because it will help you grow as well. Again, thinking about practicing regular emotional regulation techniques when you find yourself in situations of being triggered. Just try to be mindful. Even set reminders on your phone that they come up maybe 4 or 5 times a day, just to give you a prompter to think, okay, where am I right now? How can I be more mindful? How can I regulate the situation? Just go into regulation techniques. Deep breathing is a great place to start. I do this when I go to the dentist. I'm really nervous when I go in there sitting in the chair. And the deep breathing really helps calm the nerves. And it can be such a great calmer in so many different situations. Think about demonstrating empathetic listening skills. Again, letting that other person feel heard and understood, going all the way to the full stop before you respond. That's going to be a great game changer in terms of how your people see you. Cultivating positive relationships. How can we be more effective to cultivate positive relationships? Again, leaving people with the feeling that there's a sense of sincerity in how we're having that conversation, how we're showing up, the questions we're asking, the responses we're giving. We feel that we are really coming over to that person in a unique way, a one-on-one, and we're not coming in with maybe a one-size-fits-all approach. So again, thinking about how you can build trust here with them as well, cultivating positive relationships. Strengthening conflict resolution abilities. Again, the more that you are able to take perspectives of those that are in conflicts, you might have conflict with somebody else. You might have a couple of members of your team in conflict with each other. If you're able to take perspectives of those different parties and understand where they're coming from, but not necessarily about the conflict, but why the conflict is so important to them, why the facts mean so much to them. That could be a great way for you to start as well. And again, really think about how you can commit to continuous learning when it comes to developing your emotional intelligence. Let's just ask you a question about active listening. Again, can I please ask you to respond in the chat? How often do you engage in active listening during conversations? And again, please be honest and be honest with yourself. If you are always demonstrating active listening, 1, often 2, sometimes 3, rarely 4, or never 5. Thanks, Hajra. Thanks, Rasheen. Nice. Okay. I'm not seeing any 4s or 5s, which is very good. Okay, this is very good. So yeah, still not seeing any 4 or 5s, which is very good. Now, if I was to ask the people that you actively listen to vote on that same question about you when you are demonstrating active listening, are they likely to give the same number? I'll just let you think about that for 1 second. The reason I say that is because we all show up with the best of intentions. I always say that we are on the world stage every day. we show up with the best of intentions and we go out and we play to our audience. We're there as a leader to play to our audience with the best of intentions, with authenticity. Now, because our audience, they're in the majority, we are in the minority. They may see something a little bit different to how we perceive ourselves and how we show up. So that's why I asked that question. So those that you interact with on a regular basis, take a screenshot of this and ask them the same question about you. How do I demonstrate active listening? Is it often? Is it sometimes? Is it rarely? Is it never? Again, ask them to give you feedback on that, your active listening. You may see the same numbers, and if so, great. You may see a slight gap in difference of opinion. And I would say that's still great because it gives us something to work on there. It gives us something to move forward with and start to think about, okay, I'm not seeing myself in the same way that other people see me. And that goes back to the self-awareness. So think about how you can create an enhanced level of self-awareness just around that. But thank you. Priya, just ask my team too often. I'm pleased with their honesty. Well done, Priya. Thank you for having the courage to actually ask your team. Again, try to create that space of safety for yourself, because if we're showing up as a leader and I guess we're putting ourselves in a sense of vulnerable place. We're not too sure what might come back. And, we want people to tell us the truth. We don't want them to sugarcoat it, but we want to have something which is not going to sort of, paralyze us either. Yasmin, not all conversations require verbal responses. In some situations, using emotional intelligence means choosing silence to de-escalate tension and avoid conflict, or allow the other person to feel heard. Active listening isn't just about replying, it's about being fully present, understanding the speaker's emotions, and responding thoughtfully, even if that response is nonverbal. Bang on there, Yasmin. Love that. Thank you very much. Of course, we may have the best of intentions about how we want to implement emotional intelligence within our organization, and there could be things that get in the way. I mean, when we talk about barriers or obstacles, so challenges that might sometimes be presenting themselves to us. Lack of awareness or understanding could be one of them. Now, you may have some leaders who are not fully aware or understand the benefits and the impact and the importance of implementing emotional intelligence. You might also have some that are really stuck in those ways of tradition. They don't see any reason. They've always been task focused and they've got results to a certain point over the years. And because they've had results to a certain point, they feel that, okay, why change this? There's no need, without really realizing how much more could be achieved if they were to embrace and implement emotional intelligence. Time, we've talked about time already today. Time constraints, there are only so many hours in the day. And I know that I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I'd bet good money on that all of you are working over and above your allocated hours per day that you're employed to do. So time constraints could be another barrier or challenge to implement emotional intelligence. There could be cultural or organizational barriers that prevent us from doing that as well. It could be that we don't know how to measure the progress. If we were to implement emotional intelligence, how do we measure the progress that's being made? It's very, it's not necessarily tangible, is it? But if we set specific milestones and metrics of what we will be looking for, so if anything related to performance, success, and engagement, I guess you've got some measurements there that you could really dig into to show, okay, yes, it is starting to play dividends for us. There's also that fear of vulnerability. If I put myself as a leader, if I put myself into a place where all of a sudden I'm exposing myself to be seen as soft or a weak leader, that might not be good for my ongoing career. So again, that could be the fear that's holding somebody back. And it could also be, how do we sustain this over time? If we implement this now, and again, as with any change, you've got to be consistent. You've got to be consistent in terms of launching the concept, how you communicate this throughout the organization, show the importance, and you weave it into every communication internally that you can. And again, you're recognizing those small wins that are being achieved. If everyone shows up in a way that they feel that we are making progress in making sure that this becomes a new cultural way for us throughout the organization, highlighting those short-term wins could be something that will be embedded over time. And Michelle, sometimes senior management doesn't have the mindset and they don't really emphasize it when a middle management level is trying to do it. You're absolutely right. And I would always love the opportunity to sit with senior leaders and say, look, we need to cascade this down, because if we go in at the middle level and try to for them to push it up, they're going to get met with lots of resistance and challenges. So you're absolutely right there, Michelle. Thank you. Let me just ask, please. Oh, thank you, Katie. Being vulnerable makes you human. It's more relatable to your team. Yeah, it's not a weakness. For me, it's a strength. As a leader, if we can show up with vulnerability, that's a strength. Just very quickly, please. Can I ask you just to think about how strongly does your organization's culture support emotional intelligence in leadership? 1, fully supportive and actively encourages EI. 2, supportive with some initiatives in place. 3, neutral. 4, somewhat discouraging of emotional aspects in leadership. And 5, does not support EI at all. Okay, thank you. Keep those coming in, please. Again, nice to see. Well, Nikki, not nice to see your response. 4, somewhat discouraging of emotional aspects in leadership. But for the most part, they're pretty positive in the lower numbers, 1s and 2s. No comment from Jose. Okay, so let's think about how we might be able to, thank you for those responses. Really appreciate those. Let's think about what we might be able to do if we do see barriers or obstacles, how we might be able to overcome those. So let's think about, I guess, educating on the value of EI. So when we think about your barriers, I'm seeing some great responses here and some good numbers, but when we think about how we can educate on the value, hopefully you're getting more education on the value and why it's important and how we should be more mindful of creating this more consistently throughout our organizations. But we can offer workshops, we can maybe sign up to webinars or seminars similar to this, but maybe a little bit longer in duration. We can maybe incorporate some executive coaching to highlight how emotional intelligence will sort of support more effective decision-making, improve team dynamics and overall performance of the organization. I guess think about where there are leadership champions who are already developed in their emotional intelligence. How can we get these to be the ambassadors and go out, and fly the flag of emotional intelligence and all of those benefits and show a sense of vulnerability that it's not a weakness, it is a strength. And also when we think about how we can integrate AI into existing structures, what is the vision? What is the strategic vision that we have as an organization? How can we make this part of our corporation values and how we can integrate that into those daily interactions within all communications and how we show up for our products and services to our customers as well? How do we align EI with organizational goals? The two go nicely hand in hand. How can we foster a supportive culture for those that are willing to take that step forward and start to think about, okay, so I want to improve my emotional intelligence. I want to develop in this particular area. How do we create a support mechanism for those people that are showing that sense of willingness? And Michelle, I tend to notice EQ goes out the window with some management when it's the end of the year appraisal time. Oh, Michelle, that's a conversation for another webinar. We could devote 3 hours to that, I think, but you're absolutely right. But this comes back to, again, the benefits of leadership. When we start to think about the KPIs that we set for our people and how they are then appraised at the end of the year, I love having conversations with HR staff, because when we think about how somebody could be developed personally that enhances what they do professionally, we're missing a trick. If we got everyone developing on the same KPIs when it comes to departmental outcomes, how do we individually appraise for one person to another? But you're absolutely right, Michelle. Thank you. Can psychometric assessments identify emotional intelligence? Yes, some of them can. I'll be sharing one in a moment with you, Michelle, but yes, they can. I guess practical tools and feedback, giving a sense of practical tools that would be easy for people to just see something tangible that they can start applying, and then asking in a safe environment, again, how we can support that in fostering a nice culture of environment, how we can give feedback on that person and how they're showing up. I guess we've talked about celebrating small wins. These small wins could be really big wins, especially when we're trying to implement emotional intelligence over a wider organizational impact. And then I guess the last one I put down here, be the difference that you want to see. How do you want to show up in terms of your own emotional intelligence? There's so much stuff out there these days. There's so much stuff out there that will enable us to be more effective in how we recognize different things that are going on with ourselves, how we can recognize those in others without judging, just but noticing. There's so much on, podcasts, HPR videos, YouTube. There's so many things out there. Plus, obviously, there are official courses and trainings that will support you as well. But be the difference that you want to see in your organization. Because if you don't make the difference, you don't show up with those behaviors, how can we expect other people to follow suit? And if we are a leader in the true sense, lead by example. And you would start to see, maybe not overnight, but you will start to see others taking that lead and following on some of those behaviors. Jose, take the time and analyze what is actually happening and what are the people saying. Love that. Okay, look, thank you for all that you've contributed to today. I wish we had more time. We have got some time for some questions and answers, and I've been trying to answer some of those questions as they've come in. Tumi, I believe you might have some more questions for us.
Hi, Darren. Thank you so much. Hi, Darren. Thank you so much for that. It's been such an interactive session this afternoon. We do have one specific question, and I wonder if you can answer. So we've got a dilemma here. Leadership is full with emotional intelligence. However, this person finds that it can sometimes soften discipline, and people can maybe take advantage when they see that people are emotionally intelligent.
Great question. Who was that from, please, Tumi?
We don't have a name, unfortunately.
Oh, right, okay. Great question. I'm going to sort of go on a negotiation angle for a moment, because in negotiation, there's a concept that, when you have people sitting opposite sides of the table and they're both trying to get, the outcome that they want, they're not really taking into consideration the interests of each party. Now, in this instance, when it comes to emotional intelligence, I would say from the negotiation sort of learnings, let's be hard on the substance, soft on the people. Now, if you're perceived to be soft in terms of your leader and people are taking advantage of you, that's because you maybe perceive that if I have to show up with emotional intelligence, I have to be that sort of leader that just rolls over and lets people walk all over me. It's not the case. Be firm on what you're having. So if it's a performance related conversation, or if it's something that you are implementing in terms of change, just be very clear and concise on what it is you want to change, but you do it in a respectful way. So, people understand the importance of what needs to happen, and they realize that obviously there will be consequences, but you're not saying it in a very aggressive manner. These conversations do not have to be hard and sort of derogatory in the sense of how the person's feelings are being dealt with. Does that answer the question to me? So it's soft on the people, but hard on the content of what you are talking about and why you're having that conversation.
That is good. Yeah, that's good. We've got another question that's come in, is how can we manage our EQ in the heat of the moment? We know we know all the right things to do, but how do we manage that?
There's a sort of, I guess, caveat here. We are human beings and we are emotional creatures. Now, if we care about something very passionately and something happens or somebody says something that goes and sort of questions our passion, that can create a triggering mechanism where the amygdala, so when we start to think about the emotional part of the brain, there's a very small part of the brain called the amygdala, which goes into what they call a hijack, goes into that whole fight, flight or freeze mechanism. Now, if you're not familiar with that, this goes back to sort of when they say caveman times when, if something was to happen and we were going out hunting, there was this big sort of animal that was, presenting itself in front of us, we would either run, where we would just flee, we would fight, or we would just freeze. If we froze, we'd probably get eaten. And that the human brain hasn't really evolved very much from all of those years back when we were cavemen. And, we still go through this whole sort of amygdala hijack, which we're not rationally thinking about how to make the next step forward. So we will react in most conditions. We'll react. And as I said at the start of the webinar, we may get to the point where we are regretting how we've reacted. So when I was a kid and I was playing with my toys and I'd be around my grandma's house If I got frustrated, she'd all say, Darren, count to 10. And it's only in sort of recent years I understood what that meant, because for us to get back into some sense of being able to think rationally, and when it comes to making decisions, it's about 10 seconds for the amygdala to almost reset. And when we get to the point there where we are resetting, we're no longer reacting. So if you can get to the point where you just count to 10, whatever's going on, and you feel these emotional reactions within you, just don't do anything. 10 seconds might seem like a lifetime, but it's not. 10 seconds could be minimal amount of time to regret what you've either said or done. And then you're likely to make more rational decisions.
Yeah, I hear that. I think that key point you said, that we are all human. And so, we are going to have human responses, but taking that time. And I guess the more self-aware you are, the more you can feel yourself likely to give a reactive response. And then that also helps with the, counting down.
Yeah.
Thanks as well. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, Simi. I will say, look, we can shift from reacting to just pausing, counting to 10, evaluating the situation. How would we choose to respond? And then we do respond. So we're not reacting, we're responding, because we've evaluated the situation and the person within that.
Got so many questions. I don't think we'll have time to answer them all, but this one has come up, and it says, how can I use my emotional intelligence to inspire trust and resilience in my team during times of uncertainty?
I would, again, it steps into that area of vulnerability. If you can share some of those concerns that you have when things are happening that you feel maybe you're not completely in control of, share those with certain members of your team. It's not to say that you're not able to cope, but you're maybe appealing to ideas, maybe concepts that might be coming in from a wider perspective of the team, rather than just you being expected to come up with all of the solutions. And that, I find, is often the expectation of leaders in the region. We hold a certain title, so therefore we have to come up with the answers. And that's not always the... Let's think about sharing that vulnerability, because then that shows authenticity. That helps to build trust, because you're sharing with the team what your concerns are, and they in turn might share deeper concerns that they have. And as they share some of those deeper concerns, they might also start to come up with ways that might help support you in dealing with that uncertainty.
Yeah, that's really good. That's excellent. And I think the last question for the time that we have is, what tips do you have to make my team more aware of the importance of emotional intelligence in every interaction?
I would say share whatever you've gained from this webinar today. Sit down and have a conversation with your team. Say, look, I just spent an hour listening to this guy talk about emotional intelligence. These are some of the points he shared. And just discuss with them. Ask what emotional intelligence means to them. How it's important to them. Again, emotional intelligence from a leader perspective is about understanding your people. If you go in and you start dictating what emotional intelligence should be, you might be missing a trick on what it is to them. Remember, I started at the beginning asking you, how would you describe or define emotional intelligence? Take that as a starting point. Make it almost like a team building event. Just a 20-minute conversation and discussion, just to get their perspective on it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Darren. Thank you.
Thanks.
We are right out of time. And so as the poll came up, obviously, we do have a course with Inform and Connect. We're providing the course, but the course material actually comes from the amazing CLS, which is the Center for Leadership Studies. They will be, well, you would have heard of them very much so from situational leadership, and they have come out with this course here, this material about leading with emotional intelligence. And so, if you're at all interested, then you will get all of this information to you on an email. Just wanted to ask, because some people have asked this, you will receive the recording of this webinar to your registered email. And so you can go back, you can rewatch. As Darren said, this may be something that you'd want to share maybe with your team, play snippets of it, and then just say, discuss, what do you think about this? And that could be actually a great way to kind of start paving the way of importance of emotional intelligence if it's not already present. And Darren's just ended with this last slide here, which I think is just the biggest reason for emotional intelligence. If anyone was ever to ask, this has to be the reason.
Absolutely.
we never forget how people make us feel, professionally or personally. Thank you so much. If there is a word that you can just drop in here to describe how you felt about today's webinar, we'd love to see it. This has been such an interactive webinar. And Darren, thank you so much for preparing these amazing slides and for sharing your intellect and your wisdom on this. It's been really informative and something that we can all benefit and continue to grow and learn in. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And thanks to everyone that's contributed as well. You've been amazing. I really appreciate the effort for being here and contributing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Darren. Everyone have a great afternoon. Take care from where you are and take care. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
What if you and your team can be even more? Even more informed, competitive, accomplished, even more successful. With programs designed to inspire and empower everyone to become even more. Introducing Informa Connect Academy. With hundreds of global, digital, and in-person training courses led by world-renowned industry experts. Reimagining learning experiences for even more unlocked potential. Informa Connect Academy, available at informaconnect.com/academy.